So I think when I first started teaching, and I wrote a book about my experience teaching, and in the first chapter I talked about how I felt like education was the civil rights movement of our generation. And I, of course, thought that I had invented that phrase. I was like the kid on the Volkswagen ad with the Darth Vader suit who sort of like points at the car, and then the car comes on and he thinks that he did it. And so about 8 years later, when I was failing my way through my third year as a principal and trying to keep track of the number of mistakes I was making, I was thinking, if in fact this is the next generation of the civil rights movement, maybe I should check some of the lessons we ought to have learned from the first time around. Like, what were the real successes of that movement in time one? What are the mistakes they made? What are the things we can learn to figure out how to make sure we win this round? And so I started doing some reading, started digging through old documents, and I found this great recounting of the Birmingham bus boycott. And for those of you that haven't read it recently, there is this great moment, of course, where they decide to start the bus boycott. And Dr. King gives this great speech in the church in Birmingham. And they spend weeks, of course. Rosa Parks, who is a leader in the movement, is working as a secretary in King's office. They stage this big stand-up. They get the public outcry, and then they have the apparatus in place for a one-day bus boycott. And for one day, they have prepared to get everybody in town to work and to home, right? You can imagine, as a school principal, this gives me a heart attack. Like, imagine if they called you and said, all buses don't work today. You would live without that, so it's easy. District people can't imagine functioning without buses. Imagine getting kids to school one day, right? I just had a third kid, and so my wife and I are sitting trying to figure out how it's actually physically possible to get 3 kids up and dressed and to school before you get to work. It feels like it's not possible. So they can figure this out for one day. So they do it for one day, the boycott's a tremendous success, and they come back to the church and people say, great, what do we do now? I mean, we did it. And then somebody says, if we're going to break this system, we're going to have to keep this going for a long, long time. And how in the world are we going to do that? And in the primary source document that I read, there is a woman who no one in this room has probably ever heard of, whose name is Janelle McGrew. And Janelle McGrew says to somebody in that room, you know what? I have a car. I have a car. And I will take 20 people in this room, and I will get those 20 to work every single day, and I will get them home. And for the next 390 days, Janelle McGrew got 20 people to work, to the grocery store, to the post office, to the doctor's office, home, and back. And halfway through, they started realizing this. Janelle McGrew's boss found out and fired Janelle McGrew. But that wasn't enough. The police found out and didn't know how they could break this at some point, so they found folks like Janelle McGrew, and they decided that they were committing a conspiracy. And so they arrested Janelle McGrew, and they threw her in jail. And the leaders of the movement find out, and they say, oh my God, I feel so terrible. We got to go get Janelle McGrew out of jail. So they go down to the jail, they bail her out. She comes out of the prison cell, and they're saying, I'm so sorry. We totally understand, why you probably are done with this. Thank you for all that you've done. And she stops and says, I don't have time to talk. I need my keys. Because I got 20 people who are waiting to get to work. And if I don't get in my car and get them, they won't make it there. And so I tell you that story because I believe there are what I call first-liners and there are last-liners. The first line of the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all are created equal. And that is perhaps the most ambitious promise in all of world history. And it takes the awesome vision of a Thomas Jefferson to put that down on a piece of paper. But that first line is nothing without the last line of that document. Very seldom quoted, the last line of that document says, in order to fulfill this declaration, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Which is, Jefferson knew if that promise was ever going to mean anything, it was going to be because people were going to be willing to lay down their lives at Fort Sumter to be able to deliver that promise of equality. It was going to mean something because 8-year-old girls would be willing to walk into fire hoses on Edmund Pettus Bridge to make sure that promise meant something. It would mean something only if folks like Janelle McGrew got up every day for 390 days and found a way to get 20 people to work and back home. So the reason why I tell you about the last liners is that I believe, and I know from the folks I know in this room, that there are first liners in this room. There are Dr. Kings and Rosa Parkses in this room. But the only way this movement will succeed is if there are Janelle McGrews in this room. The only way we get this done is if we have folks who every day get up and are willing to do the hard work one more time. And so when you are finishing a long day of teaching and you know that you had committed to go public schools, that you were going to go knock a couple doors or make a couple phone calls or give $10 that month to a candidacy, what I tell you to do is just take these out of your pocket and put them in your hand and remind yourself of this. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. The only way we get there is the ability to do that day in and day out. And if you get thrown in jail, call me and I'll come bail you out. Thank you so much.